You can't do this to me. I love them.
That child you carry is not my son's child.
You caused all this.
What would you do? If your mother-in-law hated you so much that she'd lie about your own baby, tell doctors your child wasn't her son's just to destroy you, what would you do? That's what happened to Maya Rivers. 6 months pregnant, standing in that hospital while his mother whispered poison to his ex-girlfriend. Her husband, the man she'd lifted from nothing, had turned his back on her. He'd listened to his mother's venom, planned to divorce her, treated her like she was beneath him. But he was in a coma now, and he heard every word. When he woke up, the woman who tried to erase Maya, she came begging, and the choice Maya made changed everything. Welcome to Black Diamond Stories. If you're new here, you're about to witness a story of love, betrayal, and justice. And if you're returning, thank you. Now stay till the end because this one will shake you. Let's begin. Maya Rivers had never imagined her life would lead her to Seoul, South Korea. A Black American woman from Atlanta, Georgia, she'd moved to Korea at 25, chasing a dream that felt both reckless and necessary. She wanted to teach English, experience a new culture, find herself in a place where nobody knew her story or her pain. What she found instead was Jin Wu, broken and desperate, sitting on the steps of a crumbling apartment building in Itaewon with his head buried in his hands like a man who'd given up on tomorrow. That was 7 years ago, and the memory still felt as vivid as yesterday. Jin-woo had nothing then, absolutely nothing. His mother, Kim Hae-jin, had abandoned him when he was 23 years old, disappearing with a man who promised her a better life, a life that didn't include a son she saw as dead weight. She left Jin-woo with debts he didn't create, a reputation in Seoul's underworld he didn't want, and the crushing weight of his father's mistakes. Jin-woo's father had been a small-time loan shark who died owing money to very dangerous people. When Maya met Jin-woo, he was 3 days away from being killed by the men his father had betrayed. "You look like you could use a friend," Maya had said that day, sitting down beside him on those cold, concrete steps. Jin-woo had looked at her with hollow, exhausted eyes that had seen too much pain for someone so young. "I don't need a friend," he'd said quietly. "I need a miracle." Maya had smiled despite the sadness radiating from him. "Well," she'd said, "I'm American. We're pretty good at those." She didn't know why she helped him. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, not with the suspicion or curiosity most Koreans showed when they saw a Black woman in their neighborhood, but with the exhaustion of someone who'd stopped judging anyone because he had nothing left to lose. Maybe it was because she recognized that look. She'd worn it herself once, back in Atlanta, before she decided to leave everything behind and start over. Maya had saved money teaching English at a private academy in Gangnam. It wasn't much, barely enough to cover her tiny studio apartment and meals, but it was enough. She withdrew almost everything she had and handed it to Jin-woo that evening. Not all of his debt, but enough to buy him time, enough to keep him alive. "Why would you do this?" Jin-woo had asked, staring at the cash in his hands like it was a ghost he couldn't quite believe in. "You don't even know me." "Because everyone deserves a second chance," Maya had said simply. "Even strangers." Jin-woo had looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her, and then he'd done something that changed both their lives forever. He'd smiled. A real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes and lights up a face, the kind that says maybe the world isn't all bad after all. They became inseparable after that day. Jin-woo worked 3 jobs: security guard at a nightclub, delivery driver during the day, construction worker on weekends. He slept 4 hours a night and lived on convenience store kimbap and black coffee. Maya kept teaching English to spoiled rich kids in Gangnam, and at night, they'd sit in her tiny apartment eating cheap ramen and dreaming of better days. He taught her Korean, laughing at her pronunciation. She taught him English, correcting his grammar with patience and warmth. They shared everything, their fears, their dreams, their past traumas. And somewhere between the struggle and the hope, somewhere between the ramen and the laughter, they fell in love. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was quiet and sure, like the sun rising. One day Maya looked at Jin-woo and realized she couldn't imagine her life without him. And Jin-woo looked at Maya and saw the only person who'd ever believed in him when he was nothing. "I'm going to make something of myself," Jin-woo promised her one night, his hand covering hers on the table between them. "I'm going to give you the life you deserve, Maya. I swear it." "I don't need a fancy life," Maya had said, squeezing his hand. "I just need you, exactly as you are right now." But Jin Wu was determined. He had connections from his father's old world, dangerous ones, shadowy ones, but connections nonetheless. He started small, doing security for underground gambling dens in Gangnam and Itaewon. Then he moved up to managing them, then owning a piece of them. Jin Wu was smart, ruthlessly so when he needed to be, and surprisingly fair when he could afford it. People in Seoul's underworld began to respect him. Some even feared him. Within 3 years, Jin Wu had transformed from a man running from debt collectors to someone those same collectors worked for. And Maya had been with him every single step of the way. When Jin Wu bought his first legitimate business, a sleek nightclub in Gangnam called Eclipse, Maya had been the one who designed the interior, choosing every light fixture, every piece of furniture, every color on the walls. When he needed someone he could trust completely to manage the books and handle the money, Maya taught herself accounting, staying up late studying Korean tax law and business management. When Jin Wu was too exhausted to think straight, when the pressure of his growing empire threatened to crush him, Maya was the one who made the hard decisions, who reminded him why they were doing this. They were partners, equal a team. "We did this together," Jin Wu would say, pulling her close on the rooftop of their new apartment, overlooking the glittering lights of Seoul. "None of this would exist without you, Maya. You saved my life, and then you helped me build one worth living." And Maya believed him. She believed every word. They got married on a rainy Tuesday in October at a small government office in Gangnam with 2 witnesses they'd pulled off the street. No family, no celebration, no expensive wedding or traditional ceremony. Just them, 2 witnesses who barely knew them, and a promise to build something beautiful together. Jin Wu had wanted to wait until he could afford a big wedding, a traditional Korean ceremony with hundreds of guests and extravagant gifts, but Maya didn't care about any of that. "I don't need a party or a fancy dress," she'd said, holding his face in her hands. "I just need you to mean it when you say those vows. I need you to promise me that when things get hard, when money and power start changing you, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember us." And Jin Wu had promised. He'd looked into her eyes with tears streaming down his face and promised he would never forget. Never forget what she'd done for him. Never forget who he was before the money and the power. Back then he'd meant it. Maya was certain of that. But everything changed the day Jin Woo's mother came back. Her name was Kim Hae-jin, and she appeared at their penthouse door on a cold November morning like a ghost from a past Jin Woo had tried desperately to bury. She was older now, her face lined with bitterness and disappointment, her expensive clothes unable to hide the desperation in her eyes. The man she'd left with, the one who'd promised her a better life, had abandoned her 2 years ago. The life she thought she'd have, the wealth, the status, the comfort, had never materialized. And now her son, the boy she'd thrown away like garbage, was rich, powerful, everything she'd always wanted. "Jin Woo-ya," she'd said, tears streaming down her face as she stood in their doorway. "I'm so sorry, my son. I made a terrible mistake. Please, please forgive your mother." Maya had watched Jin Woo's face crumble. She'd watched this strong man, this Korean mafia boss who made grown men tremble, turn back into a child desperate for his mother's love. Despite everything, despite the abandonment, despite the years of pain and struggle, despite the fact that Hae-jin had left him to die, he was still her son. And sons, no matter how strong they become, have a weakness for their mothers. "Come in, mother," Jin Woo had said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. That was the beginning of the end. Hae-jin moved into their home, a sprawling luxury penthouse in Gangnam with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River, 5 bedrooms, and more space than 2 people could ever need. At first, Hae-jin was sweet to Maya, grateful even. She thanked her profusely for taking care of her son, for being there when she wasn't, for saving Jin Woo's life when he had nothing. "You're a good woman, Maya," Hae-jin had said with a warm smile. "My son is lucky to have you." But it didn't take long for the mask to slip, for the true face of Kim Hae-jin to reveal itself. "You know," Hae-jin said one morning, while Maya was making breakfast in their huge modern kitchen, In Korea, it's traditional for the wife to serve her mother-in-law tea every morning. First thing, before anything else. Maya had smiled politely, trying to be respectful. I'll remember that for tomorrow. But Jin wasn't making a suggestion. She was establishing dominance, marking her territory, reminding Maya that despite everything, this was still a Korean household with Korean rules. The comments became more frequent after that, more cutting, more deliberate. Your Korean is getting better, Maya, but you still have such a thick accent. You sound like a foreigner. It's embarrassing sometimes when Jin Woo's business associates are here. Jin Woo really needs a wife who understands our culture, Korean culture, not someone who has to have everything explained to her like a child. People talk, at the country club at business dinners. They wonder why my son married. Well, someone like you, someone so different. Each comment was a small cut, designed to make Maya bleed slowly. And they worked. Maya began to doubt herself, to question whether she truly belonged in Jin Woo's world, to wonder if maybe Jin was right. But Maya endured it. She told herself it was temporary, that Jin was just adjusting to her new life, that eventually things would get better. She told herself that Jin Woo would notice what was happening and intervene, that he would defend her, that he would choose her over his mother's poison. But Jin Woo was changing too. The more successful he became, the less time he had for Maya. He was constantly meeting with politicians who needed money, businessmen who wanted protection, other crime lords who sought alliances. He wore custom-tailored suits now that cost more than Maya used to make in a year. He drove a different luxury car every week, Mercedes, BMW, Bentley. And his mother was always in his ear, whispering, poisoning, manipulating. You've outgrown this life, Jin Woo-ya. You're not that poor boy anymore. You need someone who matches your status now, someone people respect. Maya is nice, I suppose, but she's not Korean. People don't respect you because of her. They think you're weak. They think you can't do better. Your father, rest his soul, he would have wanted you to marry a proper Korean woman, someone from a good family, someone who understands our ways. And slowly, horribly, Jin Woo started to believe her. The whispers became thoughts. The thoughts became doubts. The doubts became actions. He stopped holding Maya's hand in public, stopped introducing her as his wife at business functions. He started making excuses when she wanted to attend important events with him. This is business, Maya. You wouldn't understand. He snapped at her when she questioned his decisions, dismissed her opinions like they didn't matter anymore. The man who had once looked at her like she was his entire world now looked at her like she was an inconvenience, a mistake from his past that he couldn't quite erase. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, Jin Woo would say when Maya tried to talk to him, tried to reach the man she'd married. You don't understand this world, Maya. It's different now. I'm different now. I helped you build this world, Maya would remind him, her voice breaking with pain and frustration. I was there when you had nothing, Jin Woo. I gave you everything I had. Doesn't that matter anymore? But he wasn't listening. The man she'd saved, the man she'd loved, was disappearing behind walls of money and power and his mother's toxic influence. The final betrayal came 6 months before the accident. Jin brought Park Jae-yoon back into Jin Woo's life. Jae-yoon had been Jin Woo's girlfriend before Maya, a beautiful, elegant Korean woman from a wealthy Gangnam family. She dated Jin Woo when he was young and ambitious, before his father died, before the debts and the danger. But when Jin Woo lost everything, when he became a man running from loan sharks instead of a man with prospects, Jae-yoon had left him without hesitation. I can't be with someone who has no future, she'd told him coldly. I deserve better than this. But now that Jin Woo had money and power, now that he was someone important in Seoul's underworld and legitimate business world, Jae-yoon wanted back in. And Jin welcomed her with open arms. Jae-yoon is visiting from Busan, Jin announced one evening, bringing her into their penthouse like she owned the place. I invited her to stay with us for a few weeks. I hope that's all right. Maya had stared at Jin Woo, waiting for him to object, waiting for him to tell his mother this was inappropriate, that Maya was his wife and her feelings mattered. But Jin Woo just shrugged, barely looking up from his phone. That's fine, he'd said. We have plenty of space. Maya felt something break inside her chest. Jae-yoon was everything Hae-jin wanted for her son. Polite and demure in that particular Korean way. Beautiful with the kind of classic features that appeared in K-dramas. Sophisticated and educated from the right schools. Most importantly, she was Korean. She spoke to Jin Wu in rapid Korean, too fast for Maya to follow, shared memories of their past that Maya wasn't part of, laughed at inside jokes that excluded Maya completely. And Jin Wu, he changed around Jae-yoon. He softened. He smiled more, laughed more, came home earlier from work. He spoke to her with a gentleness he no longer showed Maya. It was like watching her husband fall in love with someone else in her own home. Maya was being erased. Slowly, systematically, deliberately erased from her own life. You should leave, Hae-jin told her one afternoon when Jin-woo was out at a business meeting. They were alone in the penthouse, and Hae-jin's mask was completely gone. You're making this harder for everyone. Jin-woo is too kind to tell you himself, but he doesn't want you anymore. He wants a real Korean wife, someone appropriate. Maya felt rage bubble up inside her chest. This is my home, she said, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. I built this life with him. You have no right. No, Hae-jin interrupted coldly. This is my son's home. This is my son's life. And you were never supposed to be here. You were just a phase, a mistake he made when he was desperate, but he's not desperate anymore. The words hit Maya like physical blows. That night, Maya confronted Jin-woo. She told him everything. His mother's cruelty, Jae-yoon's presence and what it meant, the way he'd abandoned her emotionally while still expecting her to play the role of dutiful wife. She begged him to remember who they were, what they'd built together, what they'd promised each other on that rainy Tuesday when they got married. Don't you remember? Maya asked, tears streaming down her face. Don't you remember what you said to me? That we built this together, that you couldn't have done it without me. Jin-woo had looked at her with cold, tired eyes that belonged to a stranger. Maybe my mother is right, he said quietly. Maybe we rushed into this. Maybe we got married for the wrong reasons. Maybe we made a mistake. Maya felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. A mistake, she whispered. Jin-woo, I gave you everything. I saved your life. I built this empire with you. I stood by you when you had nothing. And I'm grateful for that, Maya. I really am, he said, his voice completely devoid of emotion. But gratitude isn't the same as love, and I think we should talk about divorce. After the new year. We'll handle it quietly, discreetly. I'll make sure you're taken care of financially. He left the room after that, leaving Maya standing there in their bedroom, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach, where a 6-month-old secret was growing. She was pregnant, 6 months pregnant with Jin-woo's child. She hadn't told him yet, not because she didn't want to, but because she was terrified of what he'd say, terrified that he'd tell her to get rid of it, terrified that he'd look at their baby the same way he now looked at her, like a mistake, like something that didn't fit into his new life. But Maya didn't leave. She couldn't, because despite everything, despite the betrayal, despite the pain, despite the fact that her husband wanted to divorce her, she still loved him. She still remembered the boy on those apartment steps, the one who looked at her like she was a miracle. And she still believed that somewhere inside this cold stranger, that boy was still there. 2 weeks later, Jin-woo got into the accident that changed everything. He'd been drinking heavily, something he did more and more often lately. His security team had begged him not to drive, had offered to take him home, but Jin-woo had waved them off with the arrogance of a man who thought he was invincible. I'm fine, he'd slurred. I'm Kim Jin-woo, nothing can touch me. Until the delivery truck ran a red light at an intersection in Gangnam and slammed into the driver's side of Jin-woo's Mercedes at 60 kilometers per hour. Maya got the call at 2 in the morning. Jin-woo was in critical condition at Samsung Medical Center. Severe head trauma, brain swelling, possible coma. She should come immediately. Maya ran to the hospital in her pajamas, her hands shaking so badly she could barely call a cab, her heart pounding against her ribs like it was trying to escape her chest. When she arrived at the hospital, Hae-jin and Jae-yoon were already there in the waiting room. They looked at her with cold, accusatory eyes. "This is your fault," Jin hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You stressed him out. You distracted him with your constant complaining and neediness. If you had just left when I told you to." "I wasn't even with him tonight," Maya said, tears streaming down her face. "How is this my fault?" "Exactly," Jae-yoon added, her voice cruel and calculated. "A real wife would have been with him, would have made sure he got home safely. But you've never been a real wife, have you? Just a foreign woman who trapped him when he was weak." Maya wanted to scream, to rage, to tell them both to go to hell, but she was too scared, too focused on Jin-woo. The doctors came out an hour later with grim faces. Jin-woo had severe brain swelling, and they'd placed him in a medically induced coma to give his brain time to heal. They couldn't say how long he'd be under, days, weeks, possibly months. They couldn't guarantee he'd wake up at all. But there was something they mentioned, something that gave Maya a sliver of hope. "There's a chance he can hear you," the doctor explained. "Patients in comas sometimes report being aware of their surroundings, of hearing conversations. We can't prove it, but we encourage family members to talk to him. It might help." Maya stayed by Jin-woo's bedside every single day after that. She held his hand, talked to him for hours, told him about the baby growing inside her. She read him books, Korean novels he'd loved, American classics she'd grown up with. She played his favorite music. She reminded him of their early days together, of the dreams they'd shared, of the promises they'd made. "I know you can hear me," she whispered one night, her hand on her pregnant belly. "I know you're in there somewhere, Jin-woo, and I need you to fight. I need you to come back. Not for me, I know you don't want me anymore, but for our baby, your son. He deserves to know his father." But Jin and Jae-yoon were there too. And when Maya wasn't in the room, when she went to the bathroom or stepped out to get food, they said terrible things. Poisonous things. Things that made Jin-woo's unconscious mind scream. "She probably caused the accident on purpose," Jin whispered to Jae-yoon one afternoon, standing right next to Jin-woo's hospital bed. "She knew you were coming back into his life, Jae-yoon. She was desperate. Maybe she tampered with his car or... I don't know, but this is too convenient." "That baby she claims she's carrying probably isn't even his," Jae-yoon added, her voice dripping with malice. "You know how these foreign women are. She probably got pregnant by someone else and is trying to trap Jin-woo with it." Inside the coma, Jin-woo's mind was screaming. He could hear them, every word, every lie, every betrayal. He wanted to move, to speak, to tell them to shut their mouths and get away from him. But he couldn't. His body wouldn't respond. He was trapped inside himself, a prisoner forced to listen to the people he'd trusted poison his wife's name. And he remembered. God, he remembered everything. How could he have been so blind? So stupid? Maya had saved him. Maya had built everything with him, and he'd thrown it all away for his mother's approval and an ex-girlfriend who'd abandoned him when he had nothing. The doctors explained to the family that Jin-woo needed an expensive experimental treatment to reduce the swelling faster and potentially bring him out of the coma sooner. It was cutting edge, available at only a few hospitals in South Korea, and it wasn't guaranteed to work. But it could reduce his coma time from months to weeks. The cost was staggering, 300 million won, roughly $250,000 USD. "We can afford it," Maya said immediately, looking at Jin with desperate hope. "Jin-woo has the money. We need to do this treatment. We need to give him the best chance." But Jin shook her head coldly. "That's Jin-woo's money, not yours. I'm his mother and his next of kin. I control his accounts while he's incapacitated. And I'm not wasting 300 million won on experimental treatment that might not even work." "He could die," Maya said, her voice breaking. "Without this treatment, he might never wake up. How can you?" "Or he could wake up on his own in a few months and will have saved 300 million won," Jin interrupted. "Besides, why should I trust you with decisions about his care? You've done enough damage already. For all I know, you want him to die so you can inherit his money." Maya was devastated, but she wasn't defeated. She left the hospital that night and went to every business Jin-woo had built, the nightclubs, the restaurants, the real estate holdings. She talked to the managers, the people who remembered her, who knew what she'd done for Jin Wu in the early days. She called in favors from people who respected her. She sold every piece of jewelry Jin Wu had bought her over the years. She sold her car. She sold everything she owned that had any value. And she did something else, something that terrified her but that she had to do. Maya went to Jin Woo's main office, the legitimate front for his less-than-legitimate operations, and she sat down with his second-in-command, a man named Park Min-ho who'd worked with Jin Wu for 5 years. "I need 300 million won," Maya said, "for Jin Woo's treatment." Min-ho looked at her with surprise. His mother said, "His mother is letting him die," Maya interrupted. "She's refusing to pay for the treatment that could save him, so I'm asking you. I helped build this organization. I was there before any of you, and I'm asking you to help me save the man who gave you all everything you have." Min-ho studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "We'll get you the money," he said quietly. "The boss would want us to do whatever it takes." Within a week, Maya had raised 300 million won, some from selling her possessions, some from the legitimate businesses, some from Jin Woo's loyal men who respected what Maya had done for their boss. "I'm paying for the treatment myself," Maya told the doctors, presenting them with a cashier's check. "Start immediately." Hae-jin was absolutely furious when she found out. "That money should have been mine," she screamed at Maya in the hospital hallway. "You had no right. That's my son's money." "No," Maya said calmly, her hand on her pregnant belly. "That's the money that's going to save your son's life, the life you were willing to let slip away to save a few 100 million won." The experimental treatment began. They injected Jin Wu with specialized medication designed to reduce brain swelling faster. They monitored him constantly, and slowly, miraculously, Jin Wu started to respond. His fingers began to twitch when Maya held his hand. His eyes moved rapidly behind closed lids during REM sleep. His brain activity increased on the monitors. The doctors were cautiously hopeful. He was coming back. And then, one sunny morning 2 weeks after the treatment began, Maya walked into Jin Woo's hospital room to find Hae-jin and Jae-yoon standing over his bed, whispering urgently to each other. Maya froze just outside the door, hidden by the partially closed curtain, listening. "When he wakes up, we need to control the narrative," Hae-jin was saying. "We tell him everything. We tell him Maya caused the accident by distracting him, by stressing him out. We tell him that baby isn't his, that she got pregnant by another man and is trying to trap him." "What if he doesn't believe us?" Jae-yoon asked nervously. "He will," Hae-jin said confidently. "He was already planning to divorce her before the accident. We just need to push him the rest of the way. And then you can step in, Jae-yoon. You'll be there for him during his recovery. You'll be the good Korean woman who stood by him, who really loves him." "And what about the money she used for the treatment?" Jae-yoon asked. "We'll say she stole it," Hae-jin said coldly. "That she took it from his accounts without permission. We'll make sure she gets nothing in the divorce, nothing except what she deserves, which is to be sent back to America where she belongs." Maya's blood ran cold. These women were actively plotting to destroy her, to take away her child's father, to paint her as a villain when all she'd done was try to save the man she loved. Before Maya could decide what to do, before she could confront them or walk away, something happened that changed everything. Jin Woo's eyes opened. He blinked slowly, confused, disoriented, and then his gaze focused on his mother and Jae-yoon standing over him, still mid-conversation. Hae-jin and Jae-yoon gasped, immediately plastering fake smiles on their faces. "Jin Wu, oh my son, you're awake," Hae-jin cried dramatically, reaching for his hand. "Thank God, we've been so worried." But Jin Wu pulled his hand away sharply, his eyes hard and cold and furious in a way Maya had never seen before. "I heard everything," he said, his voice hoarse from disuse but completely clear. "Every single word, every lie you told about Maya, every scheme you plotted while I was lying here helpless." The room went completely silent. Hae-jin's face went pale. Jae-yoon took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. "Jin Woo, sweetheart, I can explain," Hae-jin started, her voice shaking. You told them my baby wasn't mine, Jin-woo said, his voice deadly quiet. You told the doctors, the nurses, anyone who would listen that my child wasn't mine. You lied about my own son. I was just trying to protect you. Jin tried again. You refused to pay for my treatment, Jin-woo continued, speaking over her. The treatment that could have saved my life, that could have brought me back to consciousness weeks earlier. You were willing to let me die to save money that you had no right to in the first place. The treatment was experimental. It might not have worked. And when my wife, the woman you despise, the woman you've tormented for years, when she scraped together 300 million won to save my life, you called it theft, Jin-woo said. You planned to use it against her in a divorce. You tried to destroy the one person who actually gave a damn whether I lived or died. Jin was crying now, real tears of panic streaming down her face. Jin-woo, please, I'm your mother. Get out, Jin-woo said quietly. What? Get out, he roared, his voice echoing through the hospital room with such force that medical equipment rattled. Both of you, get out of my room, get out of my life, and if I ever see either of you again, I will destroy you. Do you understand me? I will take everything you have and leave you with nothing, the same way you tried to do to Maya. Jae-yoon fled immediately, practically running from the room with tears streaming down her face and shame coloring her cheeks. But Jin stood frozen, staring at her son like he was a stranger she didn't recognize. You're my son, she whispered brokenly. I gave birth to you, I raised you, you can't just… No, Jin-woo said, his voice cold as ice. I was your son, past tense, but you threw that away when you abandoned me 15 years ago to chase a man who didn't want you. And you destroyed whatever was left when you tried to take away the only person who was there for me when you weren't, when you tried to poison my mind against my own wife and unborn child. Jin-woo, please. You have 10 seconds to leave this room before I call security, Jin-woo said. And believe me, mother, you don't want to see what happens if you're still here when they arrive. Jin opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Finally, she turned and left, her shoulders shaking with sobs that Jin-woo didn't care about anymore. The room fell silent. Maya stepped out from behind the curtain where she'd been standing, her hand on her pregnant belly, tears streaming down her face. Jin-woo looked at her, and for the first time in months, she saw the man she'd married. The man she'd saved on those apartment steps 7 years ago. The man who'd promised to build a life with her. I'm sorry, Jin-woo whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. Maya, I'm so sorry for everything, for listening to my mother, for letting Jae-yoon into our home, for planning to divorce you, for forgetting who you are and what you mean to me. I'm so sorry. Maya walked slowly to his bedside, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. You broke me, Jin-woo, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tears. You let them break me. You turned your back on everything we built together. You were going to throw me away like I was nothing. I know, Jin-woo said, tears rolling down his cheeks. I know what I did, and I don't deserve your forgiveness, I don't deserve you, but I'm begging anyway. I heard you, Maya. Every day while I was in that coma, I heard you talking to me, telling me about our baby, reading to me, reminding me of who we were. And I realized what an idiot I've been, what I threw away for money and power and my mother's approval. Maya looked at him for a long moment, this man who had betrayed her so completely, who had abandoned her when she needed him most. But he was also the man who'd smiled at her on those apartment steps, the man who'd worked 3 jobs to build a life with her, the father of her child. Forgiveness isn't easy, Jin-woo, Maya said softly, placing her hand over his. And trust. That's going to take a very long time to rebuild. I know, Jin-woo said, squeezing her hand desperately. And I'll spend the rest of my life earning it back. I swear to you, Maya. I'll spend every day proving that I'm worthy of you again. Maya nodded slowly, fresh tears falling. Then you better start now, because our son is going to be here in 3 months, and he deserves a father who keeps his promises. Jin-woo looked down at her belly, his eyes widening as the reality fully hit him. We're having a son. Yes, Maya said, we're having a son. Jin-woo broke down completely then, sobbing with his head against Maya's pregnant stomach, his hands gentle on the life growing inside her. "I'm sorry," he kept repeating. "I'm so sorry, to both of you. I promise I'll be better, I promise." And Maya, despite everything, believed he meant it. Over the next 3 months, Jin Wu recovered fully. And true to his word, he started rebuilding what he'd destroyed. He cut all ties with his mother, blocking her phone number, returning her letters unopened, having security remove her when she appeared at their penthouse or his offices. When Haijin sent gifts for the baby, Jin-woo donated them to charity without even looking at them. But Haijin was desperate now. She'd burned every bridge, alienated everyone who'd ever cared about her, and now her son, the only person who could give her the life of wealth and comfort she'd always craved, wanted nothing to do with her. She tried everything. She sent letters filled with apologies and promises to change. She showed up at Jin-woo's businesses, making scenes and begging to see him. She even tried to contact Maya's family in America, hoping they could intervene. Nothing worked. And then, on a cold February morning, Haijin did the unthinkable. She came to Maya. Maya was 8 months pregnant, moving slowly and carefully as she walked through the lobby of their apartment building. She'd been to a prenatal checkup and was looking forward to getting home, putting her feet up and resting. That's when she saw Haijin standing by the entrance, looking small and desperate and broken. "Please," Haijin said, tears already streaming down her face. "Please, Maya, I need to talk to you." Maya's first instinct was to walk past her, to ignore her completely the way Jin-woo had been doing. But something stopped her. Maybe it was pregnancy hormones. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the part of her that remembered what it felt like to be abandoned and alone. "You have 5 minutes," Maya said quietly. Haijin sobbed with what looked like relief. Thank you, I need you to talk to Jin-woo for me, to ask him to forgive me, to give me another chance." Maya stared at her. "You want me to help you?" "I'm begging you," Haijin said, her voice breaking. "I know I was horrible to you. I know I said terrible things, did terrible things. I lied about your baby. I tried to destroy your marriage. I refused to save my own son's life. I know all of that, but please. He's my son. He's all I have left." "You should have thought about that before you chose cruelty over love," Maya said, her voice surprisingly calm. "I know," Haijin whispered. "I know I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I'm his mother, Maya. Doesn't that count for something?" Maya looked at this woman who had tormented her, who had called her inadequate and foreign and wrong, who had tried to erase her from Jin-woo's life and from her own child's future. This woman who had stood in a hospital room and lied about Maya's baby, who had refused to save Jin-woo's life to save money she had no right to. "No," Maya said firmly. "Being someone's mother isn't enough. A mother protects her child. A mother sacrifices for her child. A mother puts her child's happiness above her own pride and prejudice. You did none of those things. You abandoned Jin-woo when he was young and needed you. You came back only when he was rich, and you tried to destroy him when he didn't give you everything you wanted." Haijin's face crumpled with despair. "So you won't help me, you won't talk to him." Maya took a deep breath, her hand moving protectively to her pregnant belly. "That's not my decision to make, it's his. You want forgiveness. You beg him, not me. You want a relationship with your son. You earn it from him, not through me. I'm not your path back into Jin-woo's life, Haijin. I'm not your ticket to comfort and wealth. I'm his wife, the mother of his child, and the woman you tried to destroy." "But he won't even see me," Haijin said desperately. "He won't take my calls or read my letters. You're my only chance." "Then I guess you have no chances left," Maya said quietly. "And that's your own fault. You made your choices, Haijin. You chose pride over love. You chose money over family. You chose cruelty over compassion. And now you have to live with the consequences." Maya turned to walk away, but Haijin grabbed her arm desperately. "Please," she cried. "I have nowhere to go. The man I left with abandoned me. I have no money, no homes, no one. Jin-woo is all I have." Maya gently removed Haijin's hand from her arm. "Then maybe now you understand how Jin-woo felt when you abandoned him 15 years ago, when he had nothing and no one, when he was desperate and alone. Except he had one difference. He had me. Someone who loved him for who he was, not what he could give her. Someone who stayed when things were hard instead of running to something easier. And with that, Maya walked away, leaving Haijin sobbing in the lobby. When Maya got upstairs to the penthouse, Jin-woo was waiting for her. He'd been watching from the window, had seen his mother approach Maya. "What did she want?" he asked quietly. "The same thing she's always wanted," Maya said, easing herself onto the couch with a tired sigh. Your money, your forgiveness, a place in your life." "What did you tell her?" Maya looked at her husband, this man who had broken her heart and was slowly, painfully putting it back together. "I told her that forgiveness is your decision, not mine. That if she wants a relationship with you, she has to earn it from you. And that I'm not her path back into your life." Jin-woo sat down beside her, pulling her close carefully because of her pregnant belly. "Do you think I'm a bad person?" he asked softly, "for cutting her out completely?" Maya thought about it for a moment. "No," she said finally. "I think you're protecting yourself and protecting our family. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is set boundaries with people who hurt us, even if they're family. Especially if they're family." "I don't think I'll ever forgive her," Jin-woo admitted. "Not for abandoning me, not for how she treated you, not for lying about our son." "Then don't," Maya said simply. "You don't owe her forgiveness just because she gave birth to you. Forgiveness is earned, Jin-woo, and some bridges once burned should stay that way." Jin-woo pulled her closer, his hand on her belly where their son was growing. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "No," Maya agreed, a small smile on her lips. "You don't, but maybe someday you will." 3 weeks later, Maya gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Elijah Rivers Kim, Elijah meaning, "My God is Yahweh," a reminder of the faith that had carried Maya through her darkest days. Haijin sent gifts to the hospital. Expensive baby clothes, a gold bracelet, flowers. Jin-woo had them all returned unopened. "She doesn't get to pretend now," he told Maya as she held their newborn son. "She doesn't get to play the doting grandmother after trying to destroy us." Maya looked down at Elijah, this perfect little human with Jin-woo's eyes and her smile, and she felt a fierce protective love surge through her. "He'll never know her," Maya said quietly. "He'll never know what she tried to do to us, and maybe that's for the best." Their life wasn't perfect after that. Jin-woo still had his empire to run, his enemies to manage, his demons to face. And Maya still carried scars from the betrayal, wounds that sometimes opened unexpectedly, making her doubt and fear and wonder if Jin-woo would change again. But they were trying, really trying. Jin-woo went to therapy to understand why he'd let his mother's poison affect him so deeply. He worked on recognizing manipulation and setting boundaries. He made a conscious effort every single day to show Maya that she mattered, that their family came first, that he would never again choose power over love. And Maya, she learned to trust again. Slowly, carefully. She learned to forgive without forgetting, to love without losing herself, to be strong enough to leave if Jin-woo ever betrayed her again, but hopeful enough to stay while he proved he wouldn't. One night, when Elijah was 3 months old, Maya found Jin-woo standing over their son's crib, just watching him sleep. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Jin-woo looked at her with tears in his eyes. "I'm thinking about how close I came to losing everything that matters. How I almost threw away the only real family I've ever had for money and power and my mother's approval. How I could have lost you and him because I was too stupid and blind to see what was right in front of me." Maya walked over and took his hand. "But you didn't lose us," she said. "You woke up, you chose us, and you're choosing us every day." "I'll choose you every day for the rest of my life," Jin-woo promised, pulling her close. "You and Elijah, you're my family, my real family, the only one that matters." And as they stood there together, watching their son sleep, Maya thought about the journey that had brought them here. The pain and the betrayal, the hospital and the coma, the lies and the truth, the darkness and the light. It hadn't been easy. It probably never would be. But they were together, and they were trying. And sometimes, Maya thought as Jin-woo kissed her forehead and their son made soft, sleeping sounds, sometimes that's all love really is. Two broken people choosing each other, again and again, especially when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. What would you have done in Maya's place? Would you have forgiven Jin Wu after everything he put you through? Would you have helped Jin when she came begging? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that remind us that love requires courage, forgiveness requires strength, and family isn't always about blood. It's about who stays when everything falls apart.